All right. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to the Audinate booth. We are located in the Central Hall at booth C3008. Again, this year we kind of planned on doing these panels. The goal was to have industry experts come in and share their perspectives on different topics that are related to audio, cloud production, and all that good stuff. And so today, yesterday we had the Avengers on. Today we have the Justice League, the comic book edition, not the movies. So they're very smart people. And so I'm not going to do the introductions myself. We'll start from the far end. Jay, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us what you do, who you work for.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. My name is Jay Cherian. I'm a industry cloud architect, leading cloud architecture for broadcast in Google Cloud.
Nice. Jan.
My name is Janmeja Heir, and I do cloud engineering for Advanced Systems Group, engineering building production systems for people.
Nice. Wes.
Hi guys, I'm Wes Hovanec, Director of Virtual Studios. What that means is effectively head solutions architect for live cloud production.
Nice. So the topic we've kind of landed on today is like the convergence of AV, IP, and broadcast, and engineers' take. The perspective that we're trying to bring is we all have, I'm a technical sales engineer. My name is Frank Padikkala, for those who don't know me. We all have engineers in our titles. And I think the definition of an engineer in the broadcast media space has evolved over the years. So we're going to take you through that perspective, get your own thoughts on it. And then, obviously, I'm obligated to ask this question as my first question whenever we have panelists. Round the horn, what is your first interaction with Dante? I know Wes has a very interesting story that we talked about, so I'll start with you, Wes.
Yeah, so I was working in a recording studio in 2011. And my boss walked in one day and said, "Have you heard of this thing called Dante?" And I said, "No." And he said, "It looks really cool, but I don't think it's going to take the place of analog audio anytime soon."
There you go.
Fast forward about 5 years. I was working at a new place, and one day he calls me up and says, "Have you worked with Dante yet? Because I'm doing a massive project all on Dante."
There you go. It's interesting. Do we all have audio engineers here? Jan?
Actually, you're going to have to forgive me because I'm a broadcast engineer. I was more video focused, but, I hear audio is a good thing.
I'll forgive you. I won't hold that against you.
Yeah. So for me, I had come into it with, doing broadcast engineering at facilities, and it's like, obviously, we had a division of audio and video sides of it. The audio team, I walk into it, and it's like, yes, that's Dante. That's Dante. Everywhere is Dante. End to end, like every facility that we had, everything was Dante. So.
That's nice. Jay?
I'm sorry, Frank. I'm a broadcast engineer, mostly video again, not so much audio. But the first time I heard about Dante was in 2021. And that was because we had a problem at Google Cloud in the sense that we couldn't get our audio to sync and the timing was off all the time. Instances. We had a genuine problem. And so I asked around as usual, and then somebody said, "Hey, why don't you check out Dante?" And then that's when we met. And 2 months later, Dante's now a partner.
So, I know before we get into the whole conversation, one of the announcements that Audinate and Google have made at this show is that we've announced a partnership. So, Dante Connect, our cloud-based production platform, is available on Google Cloud as a platform.
Yes, it is.
So, I know, so basically Dante came in to solve a problem. Can you just talk a little bit about that before we get into the meat of our conversation?
Sure. So effectively, Google Cloud is a platform. So we basically create a platform where our customers can come in and run audio visual productions. And we pretty much figured out the video part of it, but timing was always an issue. And so one of the things we ran with one of our customers was that audio timing was continuously off, especially if you're going off of screen. So one of the things we did with that customer is figure out what exactly is the root cause of the problem, and we figured out it was the timing. And as you all know, in virtualized instances, you don't have a hardware clock to sync to. And sorry if I'm getting down in the weeds a bit, but since you don't have a hardware clock... No, please do.
That's the whole point of this. I'm sure everybody wants to hear about the weeds that you got into.
That's when Dante came in, and we deployed Dante for the first time as a demo and a POC. It worked very well for us in our internal testing, and then we showed it to our customer, and the customer said, "This is exactly what we want." And then that's the first time I heard about Dante. And then wherever I turn, I'm hearing Dante again and again, and it's part of the Audinate family. So.
That's wonderful. I mean, so we've had a significant presence in the on-prem market. I mean, audio over IP as a solution, Dante's recognized, people acknowledge that, we use it. But our cloud-based announcements were more recent. It was announced last year at NAB. And ASG was actually the first partner that we signed up. And Jan and I, we've worked very closely. And Jan, can you define what ASG does for their customers? And that'll lead me to a follow-up question to you. Just so you know, the ASG crowd are here, so make sure you say the right thing.
Oh yeah, I need to check in with my marketing department first. I kind of messed up on that one.
You have your CEO standing right here.
No pressure.
It's like no pressure.
Basically, ASG is a systems integrator. You know, we just provide solutions for all of our clients. You know, broadcast industry, post-production, like whatever. You know, and it's like really, that's where you need engineering. You have a problem, you need it solved. And that's really, you know, we will build whatever systems, facilities, anything you need.
I like the simplicity of that. So, Wes, I will come back to you. And what does MediaMonks do? I know we rehearsed this. Make sure you get it right.
The digital-first marketing and advertising agency.
There you go. You nailed it. I like it. All right.
Because I work in live cloud production, we're kind of our own little compartmentalized thing. We kind of operate as a startup. Since this has really blown up recently, you'll see live cloud production on every single booth here. They give us a lot of freedom. There's a lot of interest in it. We've been working internally doing this for 4 years now, a little over 4 years. About a year ago, AWS came to us and said, hey, we have a dozen people banging down our door trying to do this, and we don't know anyone else that does it, and we know you've been doing it successfully for a long time. So we've turned into more of an integrator in the last year.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there's a content strategy, and there's marketing, and there's a bigger picture here, but we'll get into that. So I think we'll go back to the core of our conversation today. Our attempt was to define an engineer, right? And you're all doing engineering roles. There's an element of needs analysis for any engineering-driven company or a role like that. So Jay, I'll start off with you. Google is not the first name that comes to any of our minds. Neither is AWS or Microsoft. They're IT companies. They're technology companies that have solved problems for millions of people. They know that. Well, I think there's a pivot as far as the media entertainment contribution portion of that is concerned. What does Google do for that industry, and what is your role as an engineer for somebody who works in that division?
It's a great question. So I think the first thing we need to kind of figure out is that Google Cloud is a platform. So what we do is provide infrastructure, great infrastructure that's modern, secure, for anybody to use. On top of that, we add services like search and orchestration, automation tools, and even AI for subtitling and things like that. So what we do is we expand the capabilities of what a typical on-premise based software system does. What we do as Google Cloud is we are trying to create an ecosystem of partners such as Audinate and like MediaMonks and ASG. By the way, all of these guys are our partners, and establish those deep relationships that enable us to deliver for our customers together the services they need. And so let me break it down as an engineer. Like if you look at it, typically our customers, when they come to us for transmission requirements, like signal transmission of any kind, ground to cloud, between clouds and cloud to ground, you're basically operating on 3 axes. You have the cost axis, which is always present. You have the availability and reliability axis that's there. And then the last one, which is the most challenging, is latency. And one of the things we always have to figure out is with latency, if you want to measure latency, the first thing is timing and clocks. And that's where Audinate comes in. And a lot of the engineering is around figuring out in the workload where exactly you fall, the customer falls in this 3-dimensional matrix. And once you identify that, the rest of it is identifying the right technologies and the right partners to operate in there. And like Wes and his team have been doing a fantastic job in this, like especially in the cloud, in introducing content at low latency using Audinate technology and others to integrate as a service partner. I think what MediaMonks is doing is really remarkable because they're bringing disparate technologies together, integrating it together so that our customer can use it, and there's a single neck to choke, so to speak, and they can just say, hey, Wes, do this for me, and it's up and delivered. So does ASG, by the way. We've been working, just so you know, we've been working with ASG for more than 4 years. And Dave, who's a friend of mine, we've been working together for even more than 4 years. They do wonderful production works. It's in the end, it's a creative work, but the engineering piece should be abstracted out from our end customer, and that's what ASG and MediaMonks do for us.
That's excellent. I think I'll go back to you, Jan, because as you work with end customers who are trying to solve problems, Jay's done a good job of kind of articulating what exactly Google provides as a platform. We all essentially build on that platform. We're bringing in different pieces to the puzzle. As an engineer who's designing systems, where does this need start for the customer? So why would, I mean, this is a very basic question. I'm sure like every third booth here is probably talking about this, but your perspective on why would a customer want ASG or Google or Audinate to do something for them in the cloud? Like, what is the actual use case that you're seeing?
I mean, there's so many of them, and that's the thing. Is like you are separating all of your resources from any location, and so there are various needs. Like I've got places where we've got a company where everything's thrown about. We've got clients online, or they'll have production people on like one side of the country, other side of the country. They all need to work together to do the same show. They're working with people where their content is also spread out. It's not like anybody is anywhere in particular, and so it's just like, cool, do we fly everybody out to one location? Do we get it so that everybody has to come out to somewhere so that we could go to our studio and do whatever production? It's like, there's a lot of content where that's not needed. You could have everybody where they are at, coming out of their homes, coming out of their home offices, like whatever locations you have, you can get them working together. And when you say like how do the customers like what do they come with? They have a problem. They don't know that they need the cloud necessarily. They just know that they need to get these people connected. They need to have they cannot get everybody together. They just need to have the show happening, and they don't know what they need exactly. And so we're there to answer the questions for them and guide them on their journey to the cloud.
That's interesting. I guess, Wes, you've just recently done a proof of concept. It's all over the press. I mean, we're fortunate that we were a part of it, and a lot of people come up to our booth and we've been talking about it. So within the constraints of what you're allowed to talk about in a public setting, talk to us about that proof of concept that you just did.
Sure. So this was with ITV. They're the UK's second largest broadcaster behind BBC. It was an unscripted live daytime TV show, and that's all I can say. There are only a handful of them, so you might be able to figure it out. And we did a full migration of their existing broadcast studio up to the cloud. And this was a proof of concept that came to us based on cost savings. At this point, I would say it's almost irresponsible of people to not explore cloud production just from a cost savings perspective, because regular production, once you take into account licenses and depreciation of hardware and even real estate, is extraordinarily expensive. So for them, what we tried to do, and what we always tried to do, is give them an experience that's really familiar to them. We don't want to have to train new people, and we don't want to have to train their existing people. So what we did was we built this full control room in our MediaMonks London office, which was about 8 miles away from their existing control room. We had encoders that sent camera feeds up to the cloud. We had Dante Connect for audio. And all of their operators came over to the Monks office after they did their live morning show, and we did another mock show with live guests and everything like that, exactly how they had done before. Their operators sat down. They had less than 15 minutes to touch all of this new equipment that they hadn't seen before, and we did a full live show, and it was extremely successful. They loved it so much that we are now publicly allowed to talk about we're doing more work with them on this.
So cost savings, technical advancements, scalability, flexibility, all the, I guess we've hit all the marketing terms for typical cloud-based deployments, right?
I have one more, which is sustainability. It's much more sustainable, and
one.
now, especially in the EU, with all of their sustainability requirements, especially coming up very soon, I think it's really important.
And I'd like to touch on that because, and Jay, I'll give you an opportunity right after this because we were talking to a couple people yesterday, and then I was asked the question, what do you think is the biggest challenge you're faced with when trying to implement a cloud-based production? What is the challenge? And I said, to be honest, I just think it's the mindset, right? I think a lot of people are comfortable with the way things are being done today. And it is a deviation, right? But I'm going to come back to you, Wes, because what you just said is that the engineers had 15 minutes to set it up on a completely new platform.
The operators, yeah.
The operators. So it wasn't that hard. I mean, 15 minutes is pretty good in my books.
For them to learn their new thing, and that was really just feeling their way around like, oh, this is a VizRT Flex Dual as opposed to my Sony MVS 7000 switcher that I have, but it's the same buttons. Maybe the lights are different colors, but that's it. And we had graphics, we had VT, we had video switcher, audio operator, we had everybody.
Jay, please.
Yeah, so taking a step back on why cloud production, right? So you got to look at the market out there. So if you look at the market out there, viewers today are asking, almost demanding new experiences in viewing content out there. So you got this new generation of content that Wes has been working with around virtual reality. They want better content, more immersive content, better experiences while viewing this, which means that there's a certain amount of engineering that needs to go into iterating new experiences in viewership, right? In how people view content. Doing that in traditional on-prem mode means you're constantly doing refresh cycles on your equipment that's on-prem. Whereas in cloud, you're basically leasing infrastructure. You come in, you try it out. If it works with your viewers, great. If it doesn't, you can obviously shut everything down, move on. The second bigger advantage is the cloud. What the cloud really allows you to do is modernize your infrastructure without having to actually buy the whole thing yourself. So if you wanted try out a new GPU, it's there in the cloud. Just take it up and instantiate a new VM and you're good to go. Or a Kubernetes cluster, so it could be whatever you want to do. The third, I think the most important thing in the cloud, I'd say, is the ability to use cloud-specific features. It's impossible. Well, I wouldn't say nothing's impossible, but it's very difficult to have, let's say, a translation service running on-prem. But if you were running a production in the cloud, think of the possibilities if the content you're producing in language X, let's take English for ease of use, can be translated real time in another language. And all of a sudden, your audience is now global. And you can localize to wherever it needs to be. The same thing applies to subtitling, transcription, even dubbing. So these are all newer workloads that are being explored by our customers. So that, I think, that's one of the biggest advantages, which is why everybody's moving to the cloud. Like Wes said, right now it's being driven primarily by cost, but I think the future is about innovating viewer experiences in the cloud.
So Jan, I'll throw this question at you because I know there are very cool things that ASG is working about. And I know we've been involved in a very few projects that were extremely complicated, but you're able to engineer a solution for them, right? What are the kind of use cases that you're seeing today in the designs that you're doing, and what are they asking for? What are the customers asking you?
So it's interesting with the whole idea of this being a cloud-based thing, because it's cool, you could have stuff sent up into the cloud, but the thing is that when you have people that have a lot of existing infrastructure and requirements, sometimes they are not wanting to put stuff into a public cloud. They need to have a private cloud solution. They don't want to be sending stuff there. They want to have one facility in one location talking to another facility in another location. You've got multiple Dante-based facilities. You can't connect them for now, I guess. And so that's the thing, is that it's that's a really interesting implementation of it. It's you might think, hey, we built this as a cloud thing, but we can kind of re-engineer stuff, and we can rebuild it so that it is just connecting all of your facilities. You're making it so that everywhere is just able to talk to each other without even hitting public cloud. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the definition of cloud is there are obviously providers like Google that have put significant investment into making sure that their cloud infrastructure is maintained, but there are plenty of cases where there are private clouds and there's all kinds of applications, and we're cognizant of that, right? So I guess the conversation that we're going to take next is about infrastructure, right? In a traditional sense, for a broadcast production? Wes, I'll start with you. What does infrastructure mean? Like when you were putting together a good old production, what does that mean in the past, and what does it mean tomorrow? Like where are we going with that?
In the past, it means racks of equipment in control rooms and sometimes separate rooms as well. In the future, infrastructure is cloud signal flows, VMs, things like that. And then looking even further to the future, if you haven't seen NVIDIA's Holoscan for Media system, that's coming up soon, and that's a Kubernetes system that runs all containerized applications. Jay, you're nodding. I'm guessing you've seen this at some point. So I would say coming up, yes, in the very near future, and that's going to eliminate a lot of latency issues, quality issues, generation loss, everything you can imagine.
I'll throw the same question at all three of you. Like, what does infrastructure look like in your previous past life designs, and where are we going with that? You know, well, how does an engineer deal with that?
I mean, like much like you said, yeah, racks of stuff, everything you had to build out a facility. It's kind of funny of the like, you think the networking side of it or whatever, like, well, we have this facility that needs to be connected. That's all of those cable runs. How long are we doing cable runs? Oh wait, no, sorry. Like at some point after the facility's been operating for a while, like that cable's been damaged. Now somebody needs to be crawling into there and like trying to rerun cables or whatever like that. And
I think you're giving a lot of trauma to any person who's ever designed these things.
Oh man, yeah, seriously. And so it's like, as we move over towards software-defined workflows with it, it's great where it's just like, oh yeah, sorry, did you want to try out an entire global infrastructure? Like, sure, I was like doing Dante Connect stuff. I'm like, cool, let me just send Dante audio to Mumbai. Sure. I just spin up an entire global network, have stuff routing around the world and back just to test it out and see what happens. And it's interesting to be like, well, that would have been quite a long time to build that physically. That would be like insane to really be like, yeah, let's just casually do that over the day. Like, unrealistic. But everything being software defined and having access to these like whole global infrastructures, it's like, yeah, I can just build that up just to see what happens.
And Jay, from Google's perspective, like, what does that mean? I mean, it's not like the infrastructure that you created was specifically for this application, but it was there, right? Are there changes needed? Do you have to, what is Google's perspective on trying to encounter and deal with the influx of media? Because again, it's a lot of bandwidth, it's a lot of traffic. Like, what's happening there?
Well, first of all, Jan, thank you very much. I don't think anybody could have said better what software-defined cloud computing can do for the media industry.
We just need a lot more people to believe in that, and then I think it becomes a lot more easier.
That's the next step. So, you look, what is infrastructure? It's compute, network, and storage. At the basic level, that's what it is. But is that all in our industry? No. It's about, like, you take a typical operator. He goes to the broadcaster's truck or his PCR, turns on a few power buttons on, and everything's up and running. That's the experience that we want to recreate in the cloud. A lot of times, that's not the experience that they get, and that is the reason for a lot of hesitancy. So what we're doing at Google Cloud is working with partners such as ASG and MediaMonks and then creating the orchestration tools, the monitoring tools, the automation tools that will basically stand up a PCR on demand. Click a button, it's all up and running, and not just up and running, you have validation via monitoring that it's actually up and running, and signal strength and signal flows are already tested and ready for you. Second piece around infrastructure is Google runs its own infrastructure. So let's take the case of LA to Mumbai. It's going to, like, your signal is going to traverse across continents, and it's good to know that it's going to traverse through an undersea cable that's hosted on the same platform that your VMs are running on, without having to, go out to other telcos or ride other fibers somewhere else. And that's what Google Cloud does. You're right. Google Cloud was initially not built for live production, if you look at it, but really we are the largest infrastructure provider out there right from our search days. So if you look at it, our infrastructure was designed from the ground up to be global. If you look at Google Search, Gmail, YouTube, these are all billion-plus user applications. And so what cloud does is basically abstract that out for our customers and everybody else to use and scale however they want to.
Very good. So I guess I heard a couple things in terms of needing to coordinate these things and engage with the customers. So there is a conversation to be had about the skill that you need to do these things, right? We all come from some form of media background, broadcast engineers, audio engineers. Are you also comfortable saying that you're a cloud engineer today?
Yes. I would have said that before too. That's kind of how I got this job. I've jumped back and forth in my career between software engineering and audio engineering. I went to school for both. I graduated for both. And then I got a call one day that said, hey, we've been pulled off air. We just had the worst show of our life. And we're trying to do this new live cloud production thing, and it all fell apart. And the biggest issue was running audio in the cloud. So I said, sure, yeah, I'll sign up. And they said, if we still have our jobs on Monday, you also have a job. And this was a Saturday night, and I had a contract in my inbox on Tuesday. And we did our first live game for the NBA on a full cloud production infrastructure 3 weeks later. And it's been smooth sailing since then.
Nice. Jan, same question. I mean, in terms of skills, what has been the evolution of a broadcast engineer to a broadcast engineer of today? What has changed for you?
I mean, for me, getting into the cloud engineering is kind of I was doing a lot of these parts outside of my broadcast engineering roles. It's you think of spinning up infrastructure in cloud and you're spinning up VMs. I'm I was that weird dude that in high school was oh, hey, VMware, what's this do? And so there's a whole lot of different computer and IT skills that, broadcast engineers might not generally be focused on, but they become very critical. Networking is a very big part of it. So it's it might be a lot of the time, the network side of it would be a separate role than the broadcast engineer side. But when you start going to the cloud stuff, those are very important skills to be having right there. So I kind of was coming from a bit of both before I was doing broadcast engineering. It's that all becomes very, very relevant in cloud.
I'm seeing a pattern here, but I'll flip the question to Jay as well.
Frank, you shouldn't have. You're going to date me, man. When I went to school, cloud didn't exist. I'm sorry. That's just the way it was.
That was not my intention. But please, now you answered it yourself, so please continue.
Yeah, well,
it's not on me. I'm just saying. This is on
it's
record.
the question.
I didn't ask the question.
Anyway, so I think that was. I think as I have the opposite experience. I was a broadcast engineer first, and then migrated over to the cloud. Totally agree with what Wes and Jan said here. It's when you're on premises and you're a broadcast engineer, you have hyper specialization to a great degree, which means that you have a separate network engineer, a separate virtualization or computer engineer, different cable run guys, a separate guy. So, and then you have your ops people and your actual audio engineers, video engineers, directors, so on and so forth. A lot of those specializations will continue. But I think with cloud technologies and virtualization, what's going to happen is the merging of multiple skill sets into one. So everything that you would consider traditional IT skills would merge into probably a single cloud broadcast engineer person. And such an individual is going to be dual skilled. So by nature has to be a broadcast engineer because you got to understand all the use cases. But also a cloud engineer and the challenges that the cloud presents itself and all the opportunities as well. It's also, I'll add, one of the side gigs is going to be constantly keeping up with all the technology changes that are happening in the cloud. So the velocity at which everybody's launching new cloud products is just amazing. And just keeping up with that is going to be a big job in itself.
So I guess I'll ask you the follow-up to that. Is that the future you see? People who have two distinct skill sets, cloud and broadcast, and are they going to be their engineers? And there is a journey to get there. Obviously, a bulk of the industry is still getting acquainted with all these IT-driven concepts. And how do you, and I'll ask each one of you the same question, how do we prepare them for that? How can we better help? What is the process a service provider can help with those dependencies? Because you still have to work with people who still don't understand, who think the cloud is a cloud, right? And we're dealing with those people. How do you do that? What do we do?
So a lot of these things. So I think first of all, as an industry, we need to educate, newer generations in broadcast technology. So in school, this needs to be a topic that's taught and understood I do see a gap in the skill sets for a broadcast engineer coming out in the market. So that's definitely something we need to address. From a cloud perspective, I think a lot of it has to do with how. I don't think that's an area we have to worry in the schools. The schools, they got it covered. But I think existing broadcast engineer, their on-ramp into the cloud can be chaotic. And one of the things that Google's doing is we're coming up with hackathons that will enable, like in a fun way, games that allow people who are broadcast engineers to understand, okay, how does this apply to the cloud? I think it's a process of trying it out. The best thing about cloud, in my opinion, is there is no harm in trying stuff out. If you break something, it's fine. You can just add,
you just delete
the whole thing out.
Just forget it.
You don't have to, like earlier when you were working on a master control panel, like if you do something and spill coffee on it, you're in big trouble, right? But you don't have those issues these days. So I think it's easier to try
I think we
on the
should
cloud.
take note of that next time you market it. It's coffee free, coffee safe. It's a strong tagline for all things cloud.
Maybe, yes.
Jan, I'll throw you the same question. You're somebody who interacts with end users and customers, and you're trying to give them the right solution. ASG as a partner provides amazing service, makes sure that your customers are happy. But there is that dependency on different people. I mean, it's not any different from the past, right? So as we were building broadcast technologies and installing them, the install market requires you to deal with contractors and electricians and HVAC people. So it is another dependency that you need to do. How do you work with that? What does ASG provide? What do you provide as an engineer as an input to them to make their lives easier?
I mean, for like an end user client, I mean, we'll be providing training and everything on it, but it's one of those are we training you to operate the system or to be a cloud engineer? Because the thing is that we will build a solution that really you don't need to be a cloud engineer to be operating this stuff. You just need to be able to run this. And so they don't need that whole broad skill set necessarily. There's definitely going to be a mix of stuff that they're going to be needing, but just that we can train them on a more focused level of here's what we've created for you, here's how it operates. Because if you try to get the broad everything, there's so many different things. This is a job that you are always learning something new. You cannot, if you're I want to rinse and repeat and just do the same thing over, this is not going to be for you because there's so much new stuff happening all the time. But when we provide a solution, we're providing one solid solution right there. And so it's here, you don't need to worry about everything else. We'll train you on this. We'll get it so that you can operate this solution that we have provided for you. And so yeah, they're still going to need to learn some stuff that's maybe outside of their wheelhouse, so to say, but just that, we can train them on a solution.
Nice. And Wes, I'll ask you the same question, but I also want you to chime in on, there is a dependency that we've identified. We're trying to solve a problem, and, as ASG and Jan, as what you represent is a service provider. There's the role of a service provider in this, right? Essentially functioning as the integrator, the intermediary to make sure that things are done right, and you can focus on your strengths while we do the things. Google does that too. It's the thing that Google does. And the same story with MediaMonks. Can you jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with everything that's been said here. And I do think the skill set for doing what we're doing is actually getting smaller and smaller because companies like Audinate, easy as opposed to needing a very specialized cloud engineer now. It used to be, hey, go figure out what grid drivers you need and all of this, install this and configure this. And now it's gotten as simple as I'm sharing this AMI with you, spin it up and it works.
Okay, so I just wanted to follow up with this. Documentation, right? It's you're all smiling, but I think it's the engineer's blessing and bane at the same time. When you're doing these new projects that involve the overlap of AV and IP and broadcast and facilities and all this, what kind of documentation can you provide to them? What can you enable the customer with to make sure that the projects are good, and what are they looking for?
I think this kind of depends on the customer. I think it's, do you want to manage your own infrastructure? Do you want us to do it for you? I would say at a bare minimum, everybody needs documentation that explains the operation of this software.
So
and these
operation
systems.
manuals?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's at a bare minimum. And as we do move to companies making it easier to manage cloud infrastructure, I think we're going to get shorter and shorter manuals for like, here's our button that turns all of our machines on, and it's going to be one page of how to start and stop everything at some point.
I'll ask you the same question, Jan. I mean, yeah. The one thing that I do want to say is like we work with a lot of companies, and we're privileged to see the integrator bring out documentation. ASG does some fantastic work. I mean, I've seen the stuff that you do. What is your logic behind it? Like, how do you build those nice manuals and documentation pieces that outline things so perfectly?
I mean, we have a bunch of operators. This is a company that we've got a bunch of people that everybody comes from operating this stuff in the first place, or whatever. We're all used to it. We all know what the end user is going to be needing, and so there's the documentation side of it. We also will do stuff of managed services where we will just have a trained person. You want to like launch your facility right here? We will put a trained person in your facility to make sure that everything is operating. We're looking at other stuff for like an LMS, like, what are just like other tools that we can build so that you always have learning options and like documentation resources. So it is, like you're saying, it's dependent on what the client's needs are, because some of them just need the ship, they just need the keys to it. But I mean, a lot of them, it's going to need to be handheld for a very long time, and
So I think that is realistic, the hand-holding part of it, right? And so Jay, I mean, what does that look to you? I mean, what are your thoughts on the same question?
So the way I look at it, I'm going to split it into two parts. First of all, agree with everything that was said here. The first part is around infrastructure monitoring and control. I'm a big believer that documentation is code. So the code that is delivered by companies like ASG and MediaMonks, that should be sufficient document. For most part, it's a single button. You press the button, it works. That's what we want to get it to be, but documentation as code for infrastructure just makes sense. It's well understood for the most part. From a broadcast engineer's perspective, operating manuals are obviously a necessity. There's going to be minor changes when it comes to cloud production, on how you start up and how you spin down.
Yep.
But other than that, it should ideally look and feel exactly the same as a regular production.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, one of the things that we focused on as we started introducing these technologies, Dante has a history of having a very vast database of training, and we have a team of professional service and training that actually goes to people, trains them, solves their problems for them. So we're also of the same mindset. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if Vince is around here, he'll be able to give me the stat of how many thousands of people who are Dante certified at this moment. I mean, it's a global thing. So there is a significant conversation that needs to be had about the importance of documentation and training, but also the need for understanding that this is a transitional phase, right? People are moving from one technology to another. There is going to be that handholding. And I'm trying to establish the base here that is the reality of it. So I think we'll pivot to, this is my last round of questions for everyone. I want everyone to access your Apple Vision Pro or whatever it is that you use to look into the future. Crystal ball is old school. If that's what you do, do that. But what is this conversation from an engineer's perspective in terms of cloud production going to look like 2 years from now or 5 years from now? Where are we headed? What does this technology look like?
I think, like I said, it's going to be NVIDIA's Holoscan for media. It's going to be all containerized. You mentioned Kubernetes. I think that's exactly where we're going. And I think for a broadcast engineer, it's going to be a light change in mindset, whereas now it's kind of, like you said, kind of a really heavy change in culture and mindset. And a lot of people aren't willing to accept that. But a light change in mindset in the future, in the sense that we do make it really easy for people to click a button and everything works, or it doesn't work. It's a lot easier to train an existing broadcast engineer to log into a web GUI and click an on-off button than it is to train them and get them like AWS or GCP certified. That's what I think the future looks like.
Jan, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that, the idea of simplification is definitely a thing. As things evolve, obviously, you hope that things get easier. Right now, there's still a whole lot of piecing together. This is we've got a production system. Don't mind all the glue and tape. It's going to work. And as places have a little bit more of a full cohesive infrastructure, they have a whole ecosystem where they have a bunch of different products offering that will all work together. It's there's going to be ways that it's going to be simplified a little bit more of like, yes, we could just, you want this kind of system, like, sure, you got it. Yeah, really just.
Jay, same question to you.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with what Wes said. First of all, it's going to be mainstream. So cloud production is going to be mainstream for sure. That's a given. I think today, at this point in transition, we are like the last frontier, so to speak, is scale. And I think with containerized workloads and Kubernetes, one of the things that would be conquered is scale, and we would see pretty much more and more tier 1 productions being run in the cloud, which kind of like is where we're headed anyways. We will see a lot more AI-based workloads running in the cloud as well. I gotta say.
You threw in AI.
Yeah, I gotta say it.
Okay.
But it's not going to be like. So I tend to. It's not going to be the fancy stuff. It's going to be the translation, transcription, dubbing. Those workloads are going to be more important in live production than anywhere else.
I think personalization as well when it comes to AI. Yeah, giving individual people their own personalized content, their own highlight reels of sports for their favorite players as opposed to something general for a game like that.
Wonderful. Any parting thoughts? How do people contact you? And if nothing else, then we can end it. Like, I'll just go around the horn. Like, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Wes Hovanec, if you do want to contact me. If you are stuck in the old school mindset that live cloud production is not possible, frankly, get with the times or you're probably going to lose your job, to be perfectly blunt.
I don't know if I'll be allowed to keep that, but I'll try it. That's a good one. That's a good one. I like that. Jan.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, you can find me, or, Advanced Systems Group. We are ready to provide solutions for anything. And yeah, I mean, really looking towards the future, exactly that. The cloud, I hope you learn to love it because it's really not going anywhere and it's only going to provide more options and flexibility for you.
Awesome. And Jay?
Well, I'm going to stay on brand, so Google search to find me if you want to find me. But and works with all these guys as well, just so you know. I think we are at an inflection point. This is an exciting time in how live production and production in general, media industry is moving into the cloud. I'd say it's less about mindset. It's more about what broadcasters always did, which was innovate. Like, we always have been trying to find new ways of entertaining, and that's what this is all about. It's figuring out new ways that we can get our viewers to engage with our content. And as long as we are true to that mission, I think we're good.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you all for joining us. Please stay forward and check out our demos. We have another one tomorrow at 11 in the morning, another amazing group of people. But thank you all, and thank you very much for your time. I'm Frank Padikkala. Thank you.